Ashamed of his wife, Millionaire schemed with his mistress, but karma delivered the ultimate justice. You think you know the person lying next to you every night, don't you? But what if the love of your life, the one you trusted the most, was hiding a plan so sinister it could destroy you completely? This is the chilling story of a wife who uncovered the ultimate betrayal, a scheme so dark it shook her entire world. But here's the twist. She didn't crumble. She fought back in ways no one expected, and the ending, it will leave you speechless. The wineglass trembled slightly in Henry Whitmore's hand as he stared out the floor-to-ceiling window of his Manhattan penthouse. The city shimmered below, alive with ambition and endless possibilities. It was the life he had always dreamed of, a life he had fought tooth and nail to achieve. But as his gaze drifted to the dim reflection in the glass, it wasn't the glittering skyline or his tailored suit that captured his attention. It was Emma. She stood behind him, her figure softened by the warm glow of the kitchen light. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and she wore a simple sweater with faded jeans. Emma, his wife of 7 years, the woman who had stood by him through every failure and heartbreak. Yet now, as he watched her hum softly to herself while chopping vegetables, an ache of dissatisfaction coiled in his chest. She didn't belong here. "Dinner's almost ready," Emma said, her voice cutting through the thick silence. She turned to smile at him, her eyes filled with a warmth that Henry hadn't seen in years, or perhaps hadn't noticed. "Take your time," he replied, his tone clipped, distracted. He swirled the wine in his glass, avoiding her gaze. Emma paused, sensing his mood. "You've been quiet lately. Is something wrong?" Wrong. The word hung in the air like a challenge. How could he explain the growing chasm between them, the gnawing shame that surfaced whenever she joined him at events filled with his high-profile clients and their glamorous partners? She wasn't the polished, sophisticated woman they expected to see on his arm. She was ordinary. "No," he lied, his voice as hollow as the excuses he'd been making for weeks. "Just work. The investors are getting restless." Emma's face softened with understanding. "You've been working so hard, Henry. I know how much this project means to you." She crossed the room and placed a hand on his arm. "But don't forget, I'm here for you. Always." Her touch sent a wave of guilt crashing over him, but he quickly brushed it aside. "I know," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Later that evening, as Emma cleared the table and began washing the dishes, Henry retreated to his study. The room was a sanctuary of dark wood and leather, its walls lined with shelves of books he rarely touched. He poured himself another glass of wine and sat at his desk, staring at the stack of papers in front of him. But it wasn't the contracts or financial reports that occupied his mind. It was Victoria. Her name alone sent a thrill through him, a dangerous reminder of the life he had begun carving out beyond Emma's reach. Victoria Carlyle was everything Emma wasn't: elegant, bold, and unapologetically ambitious. She had swept into his life like a storm, pulling him into a whirlwind of desire and recklessness. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. A message from Victoria lit up the screen. "Victoria, can't stop thinking about you. Call me when you're free." Henry's thumb hovered over the screen, his heart pounding. The temptation was suffocating, and for a moment he let himself imagine what life would be like without Emma, without the weight of her unwavering kindness, her quiet presence, her unassuming love. He closed his eyes, leaning back in his chair. This wasn't just about desire or status, it was about freedom. The freedom to be the man he thought he needed to be, untethered by the woman who had once been his anchor, but now felt like an anchor dragging him down. In the kitchen, Emma wiped her hands on a dish towel and glanced at the clock. The evening stretched on, the quietness of their home punctuated only by the faint hum of the dishwasher. She had noticed the shift in Henry, the distance growing between them like a shadow she couldn't escape. Her eyes wandered to a framed photo on the counter, taken years ago during a road trip to the mountains. Henry's arm was wrapped around her, his smile wide and genuine. She traced a finger over his face, a lump forming in her throat. "Where did we go?" she whispered to herself. Emma didn't hear the faint click of the study door as Henry emerged, his phone in hand and his face unreadable. But as she turned to greet him, he was already heading toward the bedroom, his mind miles away. The photo sat forgotten on the counter, its smiling couple trapped in a memory that now felt like someone else's life. In the shadows of their shared life, the seeds of betrayal began to take root. Emma clung to the hope that love could bridge the growing divide, while Henry drifted further into the web of his own making. Neither of them could see the storm gathering on the horizon, a storm that would test their resilience, reshape their identities, and reveal the true cost of ambition. Henry Whitmore had become adept at leading two lives. By day, he was the celebrated real estate tycoon with sharp suits and sharper instincts. By night, he was a man consumed by desires he didn't dare name aloud. Tonight, he sat in the dim corner of an upscale bar, swirling a glass of bourbon as Victoria Carlyle slid into the seat across from him. Victoria had a way of commanding attention. Her tailored black dress hugged her figure, her dark red lipstick accentuating the sharp lines of her face. She exuded power, and Henry felt both intoxicated and intimidated by her. "You're late," she said, crossing her legs and fixing him with an expectant gaze. "Emma wanted to talk," Henry replied, his voice low. Victoria raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a smirk. "Ah, the dutiful husband routine. How quaint." Henry's jaw tightened. "It's not like that." "Isn't it?" she countered, leaning forward. "You're here with me, Henry, not her." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Henry looked away, his eyes tracing the pattern of condensation on his glass. He didn't respond, and Victoria took it as her cue to press further. "You've outgrown her," she said, her voice soft but insistent. "You've built an empire, surrounded yourself with the elite. And Emma, she's still that small-town girl who doesn't understand your world." Henry's throat tightened as guilt and pride warred within him. "She's been good to me, Victoria. Better than I deserve." Victoria rolled her eyes. "Spare me the sentimentality. Being good isn't enough, Henry. You need someone who matches your ambition, someone who complements your success." She reached across the table, her manicured fingers brushing against his hand. "You need me." For a moment, Henry let himself believe her. Victoria's confidence was magnetic, her ambition a mirror of his own. With her, he felt invincible, a man destined for greatness. But then a flicker of doubt crept in, unbidden and unwelcome. "Have you thought about what we discussed?" Victoria asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. Henry hesitated. He knew exactly what she meant, but saying it out loud would make it real. "You mean eliminating her?" Victoria said bluntly, her eyes glinting with cold determination. "We've been over this, Henry. If she's out of the picture, there's nothing holding you back. No messy divorce, no splitting assets, just freedom." Back at their penthouse, Emma sat alone in the living room, a book resting on her lap. She had tried to focus on the words, but her mind kept drifting to Henry. He had become more distant lately, his absences longer and his excuses thinner. The air in the apartment felt heavier, as if it held secrets she couldn't yet uncover. Emma glanced at her phone, hoping for a message, a sign that Henry was thinking of her. Instead, the screen remained blank. Sighing, she set the phone down and rose to her feet. As she walked toward the bedroom, her eyes caught on the corner of Henry's desk. It was cluttered with papers, something he usually avoided. A small leather-bound notebook peeked out from beneath the stack. Emma hesitated. She had never been one to invade Henry's privacy, but tonight a quiet desperation drove her forward. She reached for the notebook, her fingers trembling as she flipped it open. The pages were filled with sketches and notes for his latest project, but tucked between them was a folded piece of paper. Emma unfolded it carefully, her breath catching as she read the name at the top, Victoria Carlyle. The note was brief, a list of appointments and expenses written in Henry's handwriting. Beneath it, a message in red ink read, "Meet to discuss the plan. No mistakes." Emma's heart raced as she tried to make sense of it. The name was unfamiliar, but the context was clear enough. Henry was meeting someone behind her back. Her grip tightened on the paper, and for the first time, anger bubbled to the surface. She had always trusted him, always believed in the man who had once been her everything. But now, doubts began to creep in, whispering questions she couldn't ignore. Who was Victoria? And what was this plan they were discussing? Henry returned home late that night, the scent of bourbon lingering on his breath. Emma was already in bed, or so he thought. As he quietly slipped into the bedroom, he found her sitting up, her expression unreadable. "You're late," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "Work ran over," Henry replied, loosening his tie. Emma nodded but said nothing more. She watched him as he moved about the room, her mind racing with the possibilities. Should she confront him? Demand answers? Or was it better to wait, to gather more evidence before acting? As Henry climbed into bed beside her, Emma turned off the light. In the darkness they lay side by side, inches apart, yet miles away. The silence between them was deafening, a fragile truce masking the storm brewing beneath the surface. Emma vowed to uncover the truth, while Henry wrestled with the weight of his own deceit. And somewhere in the city, Victoria smiled to herself, confident that her plan was already in motion. The morning light filtered into the penthouse, casting soft shadows across the marble floors. Henry sat at the breakfast bar, a steaming cup of black coffee in hand. He scrolled through his phone, his brow furrowed as he read the latest market reports. Across from him, Emma quietly prepared her own tea, her movements slow and deliberate. The silence was palpable, heavier than usual. Emma stole glances at him, her mind churning with thoughts of the note she'd found the night before. Her fingers itched to confront him, to demand answers, but she held back. Not yet. She needed more. "I'll be late tonight," Henry said, breaking the silence without looking up. "Another meeting?" Emma asked, her voice light but laced with an undertone of curiosity. Henry hesitated, sensing the shift in her tone. "Yes, just some final touches on the Midtown project." Emma nodded, biting the inside of her cheek to keep from pressing further. "Of course," she murmured, setting her cup down with a soft clink. "You've been working so hard lately." Her words, though kind, felt like a dagger in Henry's chest. He swallowed the lump in his throat and stood abruptly. "I should go. I've got a lot to handle today." He kissed her on the cheek, quick, perfunctory, and devoid of warmth, before grabbing his coat and heading for the door. Emma watched him leave, her tea growing cold in her hands. As the door clicked shut, she exhaled deeply, a mix of relief and anxiety flooding her chest. Today, she decided, would be the day she started uncovering the truth. After cleaning up the breakfast dishes, Emma returned to Henry's study. The small notebook was still there, tucked under the same pile of papers, as if daring her to look again. She hesitated for only a moment before flipping it open, her eyes scanning each page with meticulous care. The entries were cryptic but revealing. Meeting dates, addresses, and large sums of money exchanged hands. Her pulse quickened as she read the names: Victoria Carlyle, Western Securities, and Blue Water Investments. At the bottom of one page was a notation: Carlyle, Friday, the Mayfair. Emma's breath hitched. The Mayfair was one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, a place she and Henry used to frequent in their earlier, happier days. It was a place for celebrations, not secret meetings. Her chest tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm. She grabbed her phone and jotted down the details, her hands trembling. Whatever was going on, she couldn't ignore it any longer. That evening, Emma dressed carefully, her attire casual enough to blend in, but polished enough to avoid suspicion. She wore a beige trench coat and pulled her hair into a low bun. The last thing she wanted was to be recognized. The Mayfair was bustling when she arrived, its dimly lit interior filled with the hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses. She slipped into a corner booth near the back, her eyes scanning the room. Then she saw them. Henry sat across from a stunning woman with sleek dark hair and an aura of confidence that turned heads. Victoria Carlyle. Emma didn't need an introduction to know who she was. Her stomach twisted as she watched them. Henry leaned in, his expression animated in a way she hadn't seen in years. Victoria laughed, the sound rich and deliberate, her hand grazing his arm. Emma's heart felt like it might shatter, but she forced herself to remain composed. She focused on their body language, the way they leaned toward each other, the intensity of their conversation. This wasn't a simple business meeting, but then something caught her attention. Victoria slid a manila folder across the table. Henry opened it, his eyes scanning the contents. Emma couldn't see what was inside, but the tension in his posture spoke volumes. Emma left the restaurant before Henry or Victoria noticed her. Her mind raced as she walked through the crowded streets, the cool night air biting at her cheeks. She replayed the scene in her head, the folder, the way Henry had looked at Victoria, as if she were the center of his world. This wasn't just an affair. This was something darker, something calculated. Back in the penthouse, Emma paced the living room, her thoughts spinning. She needed answers, but she also needed to protect herself. Whatever Henry and Victoria were planning, it wasn't good, and Emma wasn't about to let herself become collateral damage. She sat down at her laptop, pulling up a search engine. The names from Henry's notebook appeared on the screen as she typed them in one by one. Victoria Carlyle, interior designer, prominent in high-end real estate, known for her connections with wealthy clients and powerful investors. Western Securities, a private investment firm linked to several legal disputes over unethical practices. Blue Water Investments, a shell corporation with ties to offshore accounts. Emma's hands trembled as she pieced it together. These weren't just business dealings, they were part of a larger scheme. And Henry was in the middle of it. That night, as Henry returned home, Emma greeted him with her usual warmth, masking the storm brewing inside her. "How was your meeting?" she asked, her tone even. "Fine," Henry replied, his eyes avoiding hers. "Just business as usual." Emma smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "Good," she said softly, but inside she vowed that this was only the beginning. She would uncover the full truth, and when she did, Henry would realize just how wrong he had been to underestimate her. And for the first time in years, Emma felt something stir within her, a quiet, steely resolve. Whatever was coming, she would be ready. The morning came with a cold grey light that seeped through the curtains of the penthouse. Emma sat at the dining table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. Her thoughts churned with fragments of the previous night. Henry, Victoria, the manila folder. The weight of it pressed against her chest like an anchor. She had spent the night connecting dots, each discovery deepening the pit in her stomach. Victoria wasn't just Henry's mistress. She was a catalyst, a driving force behind something far more sinister than an affair. Emma reached for her phone, scrolling through the notes she had hastily typed. Every name, every detail, every shred of evidence she could gather was listed there. She knew she couldn't confront Henry without a plan. If she did, he might shut her out completely, or worse, escalate whatever he was plotting. The sound of footsteps drew her attention. Henry entered the room, his suit crisp, his tie perfectly knotted. He looked every bit the successful businessman, but to Emma, his polished appearance now seemed like a mask hiding something rotten beneath. "Good morning," he said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. Emma forced a smile. "Morning. You're leaving early today?" "Busy day," he replied, not meeting her eyes. She studied him as he sipped his coffee, his demeanor cool and detached. It struck her how easily he moved through life, carrying the weight of his lies without faltering. "Will you be home for dinner?" she asked, her tone casual. Henry hesitated for a fraction of a second, just enough for Emma to notice. "I'm not sure." Don't wait up." And with that, he was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of his cologne and a silence that felt louder than words. Emma didn't waste any time. As soon as Henry left, she grabbed her coat and headed out. She had an address from the notebook, Western Securities, and she intended to see it for herself. The office was located in a sleek, modern building downtown, its reflective glass facade shimmering in the morning light. Emma hesitated outside, her heart pounding. She had no appointment, no plan, and no idea what she was walking into. But she couldn't turn back now. Inside, the air was crisp and sterile, the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers permeating the lobby. A young receptionist greeted her with a professional smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Emma cleared her throat, her mind racing. "I'm here to see Mr. Weston. It's regarding a personal matter." The receptionist frowned slightly. "Mr. Weston is very busy. Do you have an appointment?" Emma hesitated, then forced a nervous laugh. "I'm sorry, I should have called ahead. It's just my husband, Henry Whitmore, mentioned him, and I thought I'd drop by. I didn't want to trouble him." The mention of Henry's name had the intended effect. The receptionist's polite smile widened, and she nodded. "I'll see if he's available. One moment, please." Emma sat in the plush waiting area, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She felt out of place among the high-powered professionals milling about, their designer suits and leather briefcases a stark contrast to her simple outfit. Minutes later, the receptionist returned. "Mr. Weston can see you now. Follow me." The office was expansive, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. A man in his late 40s sat behind a sleek desk, his salt-and-pepper hair neatly styled. He looked up as Emma entered, his sharp eyes assessing her immediately. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, standing to shake her hand. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Emma forced a smile, her palms damp. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. I know you're busy." Weston gestured for her to sit. "Henry and I go way back. Any friend of his is a friend of mine. What can I do for you?" Emma's mind raced. She couldn't risk revealing too much, but she needed answers. "Henry's been working so hard on the Midtown project. He mentioned your name a few times, and I just wanted to thank you personally for supporting him. It means so much to us." Weston's expression softened slightly, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Caution, perhaps, or curiosity. "Henry's a brilliant man. The Midtown project is ambitious, but I have no doubt he'll see it through." Emma leaned forward slightly, feigning interest. "He's always been ambitious. But I do worry sometimes about the pressure. Is everything going smoothly?" Weston hesitated, his gaze narrowing slightly. "Why do you ask?" Emma's heart pounded, but she kept her expression neutral. "No reason, really. He's just been so preoccupied lately. I wondered if there was anything I could do to support him." Weston's smile was tight. "Henry doesn't need much support. He's resourceful." The conversation was going nowhere, and Emma could feel the man's patience thinning. She stood, extending her hand again. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Weston. I won't keep you any longer." Weston shook her hand, his grip firm. "Of course. Give Henry my regards." As Emma left the building, her mind reeled. Weston had been careful with his words, but his guarded demeanor confirmed her suspicions. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just business. That evening, Emma sat in the living room, her laptop open on the coffee table. She had spent hours researching Western Securities and its connections, piecing together a web of shady dealings and questionable partnerships. The sound of the front door opening made her jump. Henry stepped inside, his tie loosened and his expression weary. "You're still up," he said, glancing at the laptop. "I couldn't sleep," Emma replied, closing the screen. Henry nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a moment. "You've been quiet lately." "So have you," Emma said softly, her tone laced with meaning. Henry frowned, but didn't respond. Instead, he poured himself a drink and disappeared into his study, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts. As the hours ticked by, Emma sat in the darkness, her resolve hardening. She didn't know what the next step would be, but she knew one thing for certain. Henry's lies were unraveling, and soon he would have no place to hide. The walls of their marriage were crumbling, and neither Henry nor Emma could see the full extent of the damage. But as Emma stared out the window at the city lights, she felt a spark of determination ignite within her. Whatever Henry and Victoria were planning, she would find a way to stop it. And when the truth came to light, she vowed she would be ready. The following morning, the tension in the Whitmore household was almost tangible. Emma moved about the kitchen with deliberate calm, her hands steady as she prepared a simple breakfast. Henry sat at the dining table, his eyes fixed on his phone, the soft glow of the screen reflecting the furrow in his brow. "Toast or eggs?" Emma asked, her voice neutral. "Just coffee," Henry muttered without looking up. She poured his coffee and set it on the table, stealing a glance at him. He looked tired, distracted, yet something about his posture suggested he was tightly wound, like a spring ready to snap. "Busy day?" she asked, sitting across from him with her own cup of tea. Henry hesitated, then nodded. "A lot on my plate. Meetings, calls, the usual." Emma took a slow sip of her tea, her eyes never leaving him. "I'm sure it'll all go smoothly. You always manage to handle things." The comment was innocuous enough, but Henry stiffened, his fingers tightening around the handle of his mug. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable, before returning his attention to his phone. "Yeah," he said absently. "I'll figure it out." Once Henry left for work, Emma wasted no time. She sat at the dining table, her laptop open in front of her, and began to comb through the information she had gathered. Every clue, every scrap of evidence felt like a puzzle piece waiting to be placed. She started with Western Securities, digging deeper into their connections. A string of lawsuits, accusations of fraud, and ties to offshore accounts painted a damning picture. But what caught her attention was the recurring mention of Blue Water Investments, a company that seemed to be nothing more than a facade for laundering money. Emma jotted down her findings, her hands trembling. She couldn't yet prove that Henry was directly involved, but the signs were undeniable. Her next step was to research Victoria Carlyle. The articles and profiles she found painted the image of a driven, glamorous woman with a penchant for the high life. But beneath the surface, Emma uncovered whispers of Victoria's ruthless tactics, rumors of manipulating clients, coercing investors, and using her charm to climb the social ladder. "She's dangerous," Emma murmured to herself, her stomach tightening. Later that afternoon, Emma decided to visit someone who might have answers. Linda Hargrove, an old friend and former business associate of Henry's. Linda had always been sharp, quick to read people, and unafraid to speak her mind. Emma called ahead, arranging to meet Linda at her boutique cafe in Chelsea. The cafe was a cozy, inviting space, with the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the soft hum of conversation filling the air. Linda greeted Emma with a warm smile, her auburn hair swept into a chic bun. "Emma, it's been too long. What brings you here?" Emma hesitated, her fingers tightening around her purse strap. "I need your help, Linda. It's about Henry." Linda's smile faltered, her sharp eyes narrowing. "What's going on?" Emma explained everything, her suspicions, the notebook, the meeting at the Mayfair. She left out no detail, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. When she finished, Linda leaned back in her chair, her expression grave. "I knew Henry was ambitious, but this is something else." "Do you think he's capable of—" Emma trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Linda sighed. "I don't know, but if he's mixed up with someone like Victoria Carlyle, he's in over his head. She doesn't play games, Emma. She plays to win." Emma's heart sank, but Linda reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand over hers. "You're stronger than you think, Emma. Whatever's coming, you can handle it. And if you need anything at all, you call me." That evening, as Emma returned home, she noticed something unusual. Henry's study door was slightly ajar, and the faint glow of his desk lamp spilled into the hallway. Curiosity gnawed at her, and she stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of his cologne, a scent that once brought her comfort, but now felt like a mask for his lies. Her eyes scanned the desk. Among the clutter of papers and contracts, she spotted a small flash drive, partially hidden beneath a stack of folders. Her pulse quickened as she picked it up. Could this hold the answers she was searching for? Emma slipped the drive into her pocket, her heart pounding. She would wait until Henry was asleep before investigating its contents. That night, Henry arrived home later than usual, his tie askew and his expression weary. Emma greeted him with a warm smile, masking the storm brewing within her. "You look tired," she said, pouring him a glass of wine. "It's been a long day," Henry replied, collapsing onto the couch. Emma sat beside him, her tone light but probing. "Is everything okay with the Midtown project? You've seemed stressed lately." Henry stiffened, his eyes darting to her. "Everything's fine, just the usual challenges." Emma nodded, hiding her frustration. He was lying again. As the evening wore on, Emma waited patiently. When Henry finally went to bed, she retrieved the flash drive and plugged it into her laptop. The files were encrypted, but one folder was accessible. It contained emails between Henry and Victoria, their tone both conspiratorial and intimate. One subject line sent a chill down Emma's spine. "Final steps, removing obstacles." Her hands shook as she opened the email, her eyes scanning the text. It outlined plans to secure a large sum of money through fraudulent means, using Blue Water Investments as a cover. But the final paragraph was what left her breathless. "Once Emma is out of the way, everything will fall into place. No distractions, no liabilities, just us." Emma closed the laptop, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The room spun as the truth settled over her like a heavy shroud. This wasn't just about infidelity or ambition. Henry and Victoria were plotting her downfall, financially, emotionally, perhaps even physically. But Emma wasn't the naive, trusting woman they believed her to be. She had seen the cracks in their plan, and now she had the evidence to fight back. She stared out the window at the city lights, her resolve hardening with each passing moment. The game had changed, and Emma Whitmore was ready to play. The sun rose on another brittle morning, casting a pale light over the penthouse. Emma sat by the window, the incriminating flash drive still clutched in her hand. The words from the email haunted her. "Once Emma is out of the way." A phrase so callous, so deliberate, it replayed in her mind like a broken record. She had hardly slept, her mind tangled with questions and fears. But beneath the ache in her chest, a new clarity had emerged. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a threat, and she wasn't going to wait idly for it to unfold. Emma glanced at the clock. It was nearly 7. Henry would be up soon, and she needed to act normal, at least until she had a plan. She hid the flash drive in the lining of her purse, tucking it beneath a small tear she had stitched up years ago. Her hands shook as she finished, but her resolve remained steady. The sound of footsteps signaled Henry's arrival. Emma turned to see him enter the kitchen, his expression carefully composed, though his tie hung loosely around his neck. "Morning," he said, his voice clipped. "Morning," Emma replied, setting a plate of scrambled eggs and toast on the table. Henry sat down, glancing at her briefly, before digging into his breakfast. Emma studied him, her gaze soft yet calculating. His movements were mechanical, his focus elsewhere. "Are you working late again tonight?" she asked, keeping her tone light. "Probably," Henry muttered, not looking up. "The project's in its final stages. Lots to handle." Emma nodded, suppressing the anger that simmered beneath her calm exterior. His lies had become second nature, slipping from his mouth with practiced ease. "I was thinking about going to that charity gala on Friday," she said casually, referring to an event she had attended every year since their marriage. Henry froze for a split second, his fork hovering mid-air. "I thought you didn't like crowds." "I don't," Emma said, forcing a small smile. "But it's for a good cause, and I thought it might be nice to get out for a bit." Henry hesitated, his eyes narrowing slightly. "We'll see. I might have a conflict that night." Emma said nothing, letting the silence linger. She wanted him to feel the weight of her presence, to know she wasn't the oblivious, docile wife he thought she was. Later that morning, Emma met Linda at her cafe, the small, cozy space now a haven where she could think clearly. Linda had been a source of strength in recent days, her no-nonsense advice a lifeline as Emma navigated the storm. "I found something," Emma said as they sat down. Linda's eyes sharpened. "What is it?" Emma handed her the flash drive, explaining its contents in hushed tones. Linda listened intently, her expression growing darker with each revelation. "This isn't just betrayal," Linda said when Emma finished. "This is premeditated. They're setting you up to fail, or worse." "I know," Emma replied, her voice trembling. "But I don't know what to do. If I confront him now, he'll deny everything. And Victoria? She's dangerous, Linda." Linda reached across the table, squeezing Emma's hand. "You can't confront them, not yet. You need more leverage, something they can't wriggle out of." Emma nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "I don't want to involve the police until I know exactly what they're planning. If I move too soon, they'll bury you," Linda finished grimly. The two women sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Finally, Linda spoke. "You're stronger than you think, Emma, and you're not alone in this. We'll figure it out." That evening, Emma returned home to find Henry's study door ajar again. The room was dimly lit, a faint smell of bourbon lingering in the air. She hesitated at the threshold, her pulse quickening. Inside, the desk was cluttered with papers, but one folder caught her eye. It was labeled "Blue Water" in bold letters. Emma's heart pounded as she approached the desk, her eyes scanning the room to ensure Henry wasn't nearby. She flipped the folder open, her breath catching at the documents inside. Bank statements, wire transfers, and legal contracts, all pointing to a massive embezzlement scheme. Each document was meticulously detailed, with Victoria's name appearing alongside Henry's in almost every instance. But what struck Emma most was a handwritten note tucked into the folder. "Timeline is critical. No delays. She can't suspect a thing." Emma's grip tightened on the paper. They had been planning this for months, carefully orchestrating every detail to ensure her downfall. The sound of the elevator doors opening snapped her out of her trance. She shoved the folder back into place and darted out of the study, her heart racing. Henry entered the penthouse moments later, his expression unreadable. Emma greeted him with a smile, masking the turmoil within her. That night, Emma lay awake, her mind racing with thoughts of the documents and the flash drive. Henry slept beside her, his breathing steady, his face serene. She turned to look at him, studying the man she had once loved so deeply. His features were familiar, but the person beneath them felt like a stranger. How had they come to this? A tear slid down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. This wasn't the time for tears. She needed strength, clarity, and resolve. As the city lights cast faint shadows on the ceiling, Emma made a decision. She would gather every piece of evidence she could, build a case so airtight that neither Henry nor Victoria could escape its consequences. But more than that, she would protect herself. She would not let them destroy her. In the silence of the night, Emma felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not for her marriage, but for herself. Henry might think he held all the power, but he didn't know Emma's strength. And soon he would learn that the woman he had underestimated was far more formidable than he ever imagined. The game was changing, and Emma was ready to take control. Morning arrived with a dull grey sky, the kind of weather that felt more like a warning than a beginning. Emma sat at the edge of her bed, still in her robe, staring at the flash drive she had hidden in her purse. It was like holding a grenade, the pin half pulled. The weight of the evidence pressed heavily on her mind. She needed more time, more proof, more strength, and she needed to act without tipping Henry off. The gala was set for Friday night, and Emma decided it would be her moment to observe without interference. She would watch Henry, watch Victoria, and listen for any slip of the tongue or sign of their next move. Emma chose her outfit with care, a sleek black dress that clung just enough to accentuate her figure, paired with understated jewelry. She wanted to blend into the crowd, but with an air of quiet confidence that would make it impossible to dismiss her. Henry noticed as soon as she walked into the living room. "You look different," he said, his tone hesitant. Emma smiled faintly. "It's the dress. I thought I'd try something new." He studied her, his brow furrowing slightly, as if trying to discern whether her transformation was surface level or something deeper. "You're coming tonight?" he asked, though it sounded more like a statement than a question. "I am," Emma replied evenly. "It's been too long since I've been to one of these events. I thought it might be nice to support you." Henry's jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. "Of course, it'll be good to have you there." The Mayfair Hotel's grand ballroom shimmered with opulence. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in a golden glow, and the soft hum of conversation filled the air. Waiters in crisp uniforms weaved through the crowd, balancing trays of champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres. Emma walked into the room with Henry, her arm lightly resting on his. She smiled politely at the familiar faces that greeted them, her expression calm and composed. But beneath the surface, her mind was a whirl of calculation and suspicion. Victoria arrived shortly after, a vision in an emerald green gown that seemed designed to command attention. Her sharp eyes scanned the room until they landed on Henry. A subtle smile tugged at her lips as she approached, her movements slow and deliberate. "Henry," Victoria purred, leaning in for an air kiss that lingered too long. "You're looking well tonight." Henry's hand twitched at his side, but his expression remained neutral. "Victoria," he said, his voice steady, "you've outdone yourself." Emma watched the exchange with careful detachment. The chemistry between them was palpable, their glances lingering a second too long, their tones laced with unspoken familiarity. But what struck Emma most was Victoria's demeanor. She wasn't just confident, she was possessive. Later that evening, as Henry and Victoria mingled with the crowd, Emma positioned herself near the edge of the room, close enough to observe without drawing attention. She sipped her champagne slowly, her eyes scanning for any opportunity to learn more. The opportunity came when Victoria slipped away to the terrace, her phone in hand. Emma followed at a distance, stepping outside just in time to hear Victoria's voice, sharp and controlled, cutting through the night air. "We're moving forward as planned. Henry will handle the transfer tomorrow, and by the end of the week it's done." Emma's heart raced. She pressed herself against the wall, straining to catch every word. "No, she doesn't suspect anything," Victoria continued, her tone dripping with disdain. "Emma's too naive to see what's right in front of her." Emma clenched her fists, anger flaring in her chest. The gall of this woman, the arrogance, was almost too much to bear. Victoria ended the call and lingered on the terrace, her expression smug. Emma slipped back inside, her mind racing. She didn't have the full picture yet, but she was getting closer. As the evening wound down, Emma found herself alone with Henry near the bar. She decided to test the waters, her tone casual, but her words carefully chosen. "Victoria seems very invested in your project," Emma said, swirling the last of her champagne in her glass. Henry tensed, his smile faltering for a split second. "She's been a great partner, very driven." Emma tilted her head, her eyes locking onto his. "Driven is one word for it. She's certainly passionate." Henry's gaze darted to hers, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. "What are you getting at, Emma?" "Nothing," she said, her smile faint. "Just an observation." But Henry knew better. Emma could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands flexed at his sides. She had planted a seed of doubt, and she intended to let it grow. Back at the penthouse, Emma sat alone in the living room, her dress still perfect, her makeup untouched. Henry had gone straight to his study, his demeanor unusually curt. The events of the night played over in her mind. The overheard conversation, Henry's reaction, Victoria's smug confidence. Every detail, every glance, every word was a piece of a puzzle she was determined to solve. She retrieved the flash drive from her purse and plugged it into her laptop. The encrypted files remained locked, but the accessible ones offered more pieces of the story. Transfers to offshore accounts, emails detailing plans to funnel money through shell corporations, and more veiled references to removing obstacles. Emma's hands trembled as she closed the laptop. The evidence was mounting, but it wasn't enough. She needed something irrefutable, something that would bring their entire scheme crashing down. That night, as the city lights flickered outside, Emma lay awake, her mind racing with possibilities. She had spent years believing in Henry, standing by him, loving him, but now she saw him for what he truly was, a man willing to destroy the very person who had helped him rise. And Victoria? She was a spark, igniting a fire that could consume them all. But Emma wasn't afraid of the flames. She was ready to fight. The game was nearing its climax, and Emma was no longer the naive, trusting wife. She was a woman with nothing to lose and everything to gain. The next morning was eerily quiet. The tension that had simmered between Emma and Henry had grown into something palpable, a silent battle playing out in glances and unspoken words. Henry left early for the office, his departure unusually abrupt. Emma knew something was coming. She could feel it in the air. Once he was gone, she set her plan into motion. She packed a small bag, leaving the essentials behind, and slipped the flash drive into a hidden compartment. Today wasn't just about survival. It was about striking back. Emma's first stop was Linda's cafe. She placed the bag on the table between them and handed Linda a printout of the evidence she had compiled. "This is everything," Emma said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "The transfers, the shell corporations, the plans, it's all here." Linda scanned the pages, her eyes narrowing. "This is enough to take to the authorities. But Emma, once you do this, there's no going back. Are you ready for that?" Emma met her gaze, her expression resolute. "They were planning to destroy me, Linda. I can't let them win." Linda nodded. "Then we'll do this together." That afternoon, Emma reached out to an attorney she had discreetly consulted earlier in the week. With Linda's help, she also contacted a financial crimes investigator. Together, they crafted a plan to expose Henry and Victoria's scheme. Emma arranged for a meeting with Henry that evening, pretending to be concerned about their marriage. She played the part of the loyal wife one last time, knowing it was the bait he wouldn't resist. Henry arrived home that evening to find Emma waiting for him in the living room. She had dressed in a simple blouse and slacks, her demeanor calm and collected. "Emma," he said cautiously, loosening his tie. "What's this about?" "We need to talk," she replied, gesturing for him to sit. Henry hesitated but complied, his expression guarded. Emma began slowly, her tone soft but deliberate. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about the distance that's grown between us. I know you've been under a lot of pressure." Henry frowned, his defenses rising. "It's just work, Emma. You don't need to worry." "But I do," she said, leaning forward, "because I feel like I've lost you, like you've become someone I don't recognize." Henry stiffened. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying I know about Victoria," Emma said, her voice firm but quiet. The words landed like a blow. Henry's eyes widened briefly before narrowing. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me, Henry," Emma said, her voice growing colder. "I know about the money, the offshore accounts, the plans to remove me as your obstacle. I've seen the emails. I've seen the documents. Henry's face paled, his mask cracking. Emma, listen. No, she interrupted, standing. You listen. I loved you, Henry. I believed in you, and this is how you repay me, by plotting with her to destroy me? Henry rose to his feet, his composure unraveling. It wasn't like that. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, Emma said, her voice shaking with anger. You wanted to erase me from your life because I didn't fit your image anymore. Well, guess what? You're about to learn what it feels like to lose everything. As Emma spoke, the doorbell rang. Henry froze, his gaze darting toward the sound. Who is that? He demanded. The authorities, Emma replied, her tone icy. The door opened and 2 investigators stepped inside, accompanied by a police officer. They presented Henry with a warrant, their expressions stern. Henry Whitmore, you are under investigation for financial fraud, embezzlement and conspiracy, one of the investigators said. Henry turned to Emma, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. You did this? You did this to yourself, Emma replied, her voice steady. As the officers escorted Henry out, Emma felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. This wasn't how she had envisioned her life, but it was the only way forward. Victoria wasn't far behind. With the evidence Emma had provided, investigators uncovered her role in the scheme, and her carefully curated reputation crumbled. Within days, her name was splashed across headlines, her business shuttered, and her social circle dissolved. Weeks later, Emma stood in her new apartment, a modest but cozy space filled with sunlight and peace. She had cut ties with the past, leaving the penthouse and everything it represented behind. Linda visited often, bringing updates on the case and words of encouragement. Emma had started volunteering again, returning to the work that had always brought her joy. One evening, she sat at her desk, penning a letter to herself, a promise to never lose sight of who she was, no matter what life threw her way. As Emma gazed out the window at the city lights, she felt a quiet sense of triumph. She had faced betrayal, humiliation, and danger, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and free. The woman Henry had underestimated was gone. In her place was someone unbreakable, someone who had learned to fight for herself, and won. And as the city hummed around her, Emma smiled. This was only the beginning. Emma's story is a powerful reminder that strength often lies hidden until it's tested. Betrayed by the person she trusted most, she didn't let the darkness consume her. Instead, she rose, reclaiming her life and proving that resilience and truth can outshine even the deepest betrayal. If you found this story as gripping and inspiring as I did, don't leave without subscribing to this channel. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you'll never miss another incredible story like this one. Let's keep exploring tales that show the triumph of the human spirit.
They say money can't buy happiness. But for Chloe Vance, it was the only currency that mattered. She had her sights set on the ultimate prize, a New York City CEO, a penthouse, and a life dripping in diamonds. She played her part perfectly, the irresistible siren luring Julian Croft away from his pregnant wife. Chloe thought she was writing her own fairy tale, securing her future, one secret rendezvous at a time. She never imagined that every whispered promise, every stolen kiss, and every expensive gift was just a scene in a much larger play. A play written, directed, and starring the one woman she dismissed as a casualty, the wife. And the final act was about to bring her world crashing down in the most public, most humiliating way imaginable. The view from the 80th floor penthouse was an ocean of glittering lights. Manhattan stretched below a concrete and glass kingdom, and from this vantage point, Catherine Sterling Croft was its queen. Her hand rested gently on the subtle swell of her stomach, a protective gesture that had become second nature over the past 5 months. The baby there first was a secret joy. She and her husband, Julian Croft, had nurtured a final perfect piece to complete the portrait of their enviable lives. Julian was the charismatic founder and CEO of Croft Innovations, a tech behemoth that had disrupted the logistics industry. He was the new money wunderkind, celebrated on magazine covers for his sharp mind and even sharper suits. Catherine, by contrast, was old money Grace. The Sterlings were a name synonymous with New York philanthropy and quiet, unshakable influence. Their union had been the talk of the society pages, a merger of dynamic innovation and established prestige. From the outside, it was perfect. The sprawling apartment with its curated art, the weekend trips to their estate in the Hamptons, the effortless access to a world of impossible reservations and exclusive events. Julian was attentive often, bringing home ridiculously expensive floral arrangements for no reason, or whispering how her pregnancy had only made her more beautiful. But lately the perfection had begun to feel brittle, like a flawless porcelain vase with a hairline crack invisible to the casual observer, but threatening to shatter with the slightest tremor. It started with the phone. Julian had always been attached to it, a necessary evil of his trade. But now it was an extension of his hand, angled away from her with a new subtle secrecy. Late-night strategy sessions became more frequent. Business trips to London or Tokyo were extended by a day, then 2 with rushed, staticky apologies. "Another late one, darling?" Catherine asked one Tuesday evening, her voice carefully neutral. She was arranging white peonies in a crystal vase on the marble island in their kitchen. The scent filled the sterile air, a fragrant mask for the anxiety coiling in her gut. Julian loosened his tie, dropping his briefcase by the door with a heavy thud. "You wouldn't believe it. The board is breathing down my neck about the Q3 projections. We're on the verge of a massive breakthrough, but the pressure is immense." He walked over, kissing the top of her head. His cologne, a custom blend from a perfumer in Paris, smelled faintly of sandalwood and something else, a cloying sweetness that wasn't hers, a floral note, something cheap. She forced a smile. "Well, you need to take care of yourself. And us." She patted her stomach meaningfully. His eyes softened, the guilt flickering so quickly. She might have missed it if she weren't looking for it. "Of course, you two are my world. Everything I do is for you." But the words felt rehearsed, a script he was reciting to convince himself as much as her. A week later, the first real tremor struck. Catherine was organizing their monthly receipts for their business manager, a tedious task she nonetheless performed with meticulous care. Tucked between a charge for a $1,000 dinner at Per Se and a payment to Julian's tailor was a receipt from Cartier. It was for a Trinity bracelet, the interwoven bands of rose yellow and white gold. A classic. It was dated 3 weeks prior. Her heart did a slow, painful lurch. It wasn't her birthday. It wasn't their anniversary. She had certainly never received it. She called her best friend, Olivia Brent, a sharp-witted art gallery owner who had been her confidant since their days at boarding school. "Tell me I'm being a crazy hormonal pregnant woman," Catherine said, her voice tight after explaining the receipt. "You're pregnant, yes. Hormonal, probably. But crazy." "Not a chance," Olivia stated flatly. "Catherine, you have the best intuition of anyone I know. If you feel like something is wrong, something is wrong. Men like Julian, they live in a world of temptation. They think their success makes them invincible." "But he loves me, Liv. I know he does." "I'm sure he does," Olivia conceded gently. "But powerful men can be monumentally stupid. They compartmentalize. They think they can have the perfect wife and the bit on the side and keep the two worlds from ever colliding. What are you going to do?" Catherine looked around the silent, opulent apartment. The city lights outside seemed to mock her. "I don't know yet. I need more than a receipt. I need proof. If I accuse him and I'm wrong, I'll destroy what we have based on a feeling." "And if you're right, he's already destroying it," Olivia countered. "Be careful, Cat. Don't show your hand until you have a royal flush." The conversation solidified a cold resolve in her heart. The hurt was a deep physical ache, but beneath it the sterling steel was beginning to harden. She had not been raised to be a victim. She was a strategist, just like her father, a man who had dominated Wall Street for 40 years. She hired a private investigator, a discreet, expensive firm, recommended by her family's lawyer. She hated herself for it. It felt like a betrayal in itself, a clandestine act that sullied their marriage. But the Cartier receipt was a splinter in her mind, and she had to get it out. 2 weeks later, a plain manila envelope arrived via courier. Catherine waited until Julian had left for a weekend retreat with the board in Aspen. Her hands trembled as she sat at her rosewood desk, the city skyline, a grey, unforgiving backdrop. Inside were photographs, grainy, long-lens shots but unmistakable. Julian. He was laughing, his arm draped possessively around a young woman with fierce ambition in her eyes and a mane of artificially blonde hair. They were stepping out of a boutique hotel in Soho. In another photo, they were dining at a dimly lit table, their heads close together. In the final damning shot, the woman was lifting her wrist to admire her new piece of jewelry. The Cartier Trinity bracelet. The air left Catherine's lungs in a silent scream. The vase didn't just have a crack. It had been shattered into a million pieces at her feet. The pain was blinding, a white-hot agony that consumed her. It wasn't just the betrayal of his body, but the casual cruelty of it. The lies whispered in their bed, the stolen moments, the gift, a symbol of trinity, of interconnectedness, given to another woman, while his wife carried their child. She wept. For hours, she let the grief wash over her, a storm of tears for the man she thought she knew and the life she believed they were building. She cried for her unborn child, who would be born into a fractured home. But as the sun began to set, casting long, mournful shadows across the room, the tears subsided. The storm passed, and in its wake there was a chilling, profound calm. The hurt was still there, a cold, heavy stone in her chest, but it was no longer her master. It was fuel. Olivia was wrong. A royal flush wasn't enough. Confronting him would lead to tearful apologies, empty promises, a messy divorce where lawyers would pick over the bones of their life. Chloe, the woman in the photos, would likely get a settlement and fade away, a minor footnote in their drama. Julian might even eventually be forgiven. No. That was not justice. That was not a solution. It was a concession. A simple divorce was a release. What Julian and that woman deserved was a lesson, a reckoning, a meticulously crafted, perfectly executed ruin that would not only end their affair, but would dismantle the very foundation of the mistress's ambition and force Julian to confront the chasm of his own weakness. She picked up her phone, her hand steady now. She didn't call a lawyer. She called the one person in the world she knew would understand the need for something more than just revenge. The one person who would relish the game. Her brother, Marcus Sterling. "Marcus," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "I need your help. It's about Julian, and I have a plan." Chloe Vance believed in manifestation, Not the gentle yoga and incense kind, but a ruthless, focused targeting of desire. And her desire had a name, the 1%. From her cramped studio apartment in Bushwick, a stark contrast to the world she craved, she would scroll through Instagram and Forbes, studying the habitats and habits of the ultra-rich. She saw herself not as an outsider looking in, but as a predator studying her prey. Her friend Zara, who worked as a bottle service girl in a meat-packing district club, was her co-conspirator and enabler. "Look, Chloe," Zara had said, perched on the edge of Chloe's bed and filing her acrylic nails. "You're gorgeous, you're smart, and you're hungry. Don't waste that on some broke artist who thinks sharing an Uber is splurging. You're built for better things. You just need the right launch pad." Chloe couldn't agree more. She'd worked for 2 years as a junior marketing associate at a stodgy second-tier tech firm, watching men with half her wit and 1/10 of her drive get promoted because they'd gone to the right schools or played golf with the right people. She saw the system was rigged, so she'd decided to rig it back in her favor. Marriage, she concluded, was the fastest, most effective merger and acquisition a woman like her could execute. Julian Croft became her target by design. She'd read a feature on him in Wired magazine detailing his meteoric rise. He was brilliant, driven, and most importantly married to a woman who seemed in Chloe's estimation to be a boring old money placeholder. Catherine Sterling Croft was beautiful in a classical, understated way, but she lacked the fire, the edge that Chloe cultivated. She was a museum piece. Chloe was a living flame. Chloe engineered their first meeting with the precision of a military campaign. She learned from a disgruntled ex-employee on LinkedIn that Julian often went for a solitary drink at the Aviary, a high-end cocktail bar in Columbus Circle, to decompress after a tough week. She chose her armor carefully, a silk slip dress that was just a little too daring for the venue heels that made her legs look endless, and a perfume, a heady, almost aggressive gardenia scent that was impossible to ignore. She sat at the bar, nursing a single expensive cocktail, and waited. When Julian walked in, looking weary and powerful, she accidentally caught his eye and gave him a small conspiratorial smile. As he sat a few stools down, she pretended to be engrossed in a book, ironically, a biography of Napoleon. It took him less than 10 minutes. "That looks like heavy reading for a Friday night," he said, his voice as smooth as the aged whiskey the bartender was pouring for him. Chloe looked up, feigning surprise. "I find it's best to learn from those who knew how to conquer the world." She closed the book, her fingers tracing the title. "Chloe Vance," she said, extending a hand. Her nails were immaculate, painted a deep predatory red. "Julian Croft." "I know," she said with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Everyone in the tech world knows who you are." The hook was in. He was flattered. Over the next hour, she played him like a virtuoso. She was impressed by his work, but not starstruck. She challenged his opinions on market trends, showing she was more than just a pretty face. She listened intently, her gaze never wavering, making him feel like the only man in the universe. She was a perfect cocktail of intellect, beauty, and unabashed admiration. She never mentioned his wife. When he glanced at his wedding ring, a solid platinum band, she simply let her eyes follow his. A flicker of something disappointment, understanding passing through them before she smiled and changed the subject. She was planting a seed she doesn't judge, she understands. He walked her to the curb to get a taxi. "I shouldn't," he said, the internal conflict clear on his face. "But I'd love to continue this conversation." "I'm not a home wrecker, Julian," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm. Her touch was electric. "But I'm also not blind. I see a man who isn't being celebrated. If you ever want to talk to someone who gets it, you have my number." She had already written it on a napkin and slipped it into his suit pocket when he wasn't looking. It was a bold, presumptive move, and it paid off. He texted her the next day. Their affair escalated quickly from discreet lunches in out-of-the-way bistros to afternoons in the sterile luxury of a suite at the Greenwich Hotel. Chloe was everything Catherine wasn't. Where Catherine was calm, Chloe was fiery. Where Catherine's world was one of quiet legacy, Chloe's was one of fierce, palpable ambition. She made Julian feel like a king, a conqueror, not just a husband. "She doesn't understand the pressure you're under," Chloe would murmur, tracing the lines of his jaw as they lay in the post-coital tangle of hotel sheets. Her money was inherited. Yours is earned. It's different. It's real. She was an expert at identifying his insecurities and soothing them. She praised his riskiest business decisions, validated his frustrations with his board of directors, and made him feel seen in a way he hadn't in years. She was the ultimate cheerleader for the cult of Julian Croft, and he in turn showered her with gifts. It started small, a bouquet of exotic orchids delivered to her apartment, a first-edition book she'd mentioned. Then it escalated. A shopping spree on Fifth Avenue, a weekend in Miami on a business trip, and then the Cartier bracelet. He presented it to her in their hotel room. The famous red box sat on the pillow. Chloe's heart hammered in her chest. This was it. This was the moment a man transitions a woman from a dalliance to an investment. "Julian, it's beautiful." She breathed her performance of awe-struck gratitude. Pitch perfect. She allowed a single tear to trace a path down her cheek. "But you shouldn't have." "I wanted it to," he said, his voice thick with a mixture of desire and guilt. "You deserve beautiful things." As he fastened the cool gold around her wrist, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. The bracelet was a shackle of a different kind, one of victory. She had him. The CEO was hers. She thought of his pregnant wife somewhere in their palatial penthouse, probably arranging flowers or planning a nursery, blissfully unaware. Chloe felt a flash of pity, quickly replaced by a surge of triumph. The woman hadn't fought for her man. She had grown complacent, secure in her position, and had left the door wide open for someone like Chloe to walk right in. "What are you thinking about?" Julian asked, kissing her shoulder. Chloe met his eyes in the mirror, her expression a carefully constructed mask of adoration. "I'm thinking," she said, her voice a seductive whisper, "that I'm the luckiest woman in the world." She was playing the long game. The bracelet was a down payment. The end goal was the full buyout. His name, his fortune, his life. The pregnant wife was a temporary obstacle, one that Chloe was confident would soon be removed. She had studied her target, laid her trap, and secured her prize. She was the serpent in their Eden, and she had just convinced Adam to take the first bite. She was so focused on the apple, she never once thought to look up and see God watching. The days following the arrival of the investigator's report were a masterclass in composure for Catherine. On the surface, nothing changed. She continued her work with the Sterling Family Foundation, attended her prenatal yoga classes, and discussed nursery color palettes with an interior designer. She greeted Julian with a serene smile when he returned from his board retreat, a weekend he'd spent with Chloe in a luxury ski lodge, according to the PI's follow-up email. She listened to his stories of high-altitude negotiations, her heart a frozen stone in her chest. Each lie he told was another brick in the wall she was building around it. Her grief, once a raging inferno, had been banked and forged into something cold, sharp, and patient. This was no longer about a broken heart. It was about protecting her legacy and her child's future from the collateral damage of Julian's weakness and his mistress's greed. Her brother Marcus Sterling arrived at the penthouse 2 days after her call. He was Catherine's opposite in many ways. While she was composed and classical, Marcus was a whirlwind of creative energy and roguish charm. He'd flirted with acting in his 20s, much to their father's chagrin, before finding his niche in venture capitalism, backing boutique hotels and eccentric art projects. He had a chameleon's ability to adapt to any situation and an actor's love for a dramatic role. Most importantly, he was fiercely loyal to his sister. He found her in the library, the damning photos spread across the antique desk. He looked at them, his jaw tightening, then at his sister's pale, determined face. "I could have him ruined on Wall Street by morning," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. A few calls, a few whispered rumors about instability at Croft Innovations. His stock would plummet. Catherine shook her head, pushing the photos into a neat pile. "No, that hurts me. It hurts the baby. And it's too simple. Julian's crime isn't just infidelity, it's arrogance. He thinks he's untouchable. And this woman..." She gestured to the image of Chloe laughing and radiant with Julian's stolen affection. "Her crime is ambition. She doesn't want Julian. She wants what he represents. A key to a kingdom she feels entitled to." So we don't destroy the kingdom," Catherine said, her eyes gleaming with a cold, intelligent light. "We present her with a bigger one. We make her believe she's trading up. We make her discard Julian like he's last season's handbag." Marcus leaned back, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across his face. He recognized the look in his sister's eyes. It was the same look their father got before a hostile takeover. "Oh, this is much better than my idea. You want to humiliate them both. You want to make him feel the sting of being tossed aside for a better offer. And you want to strip her of everything when she reaches for it. This is diabolical. I love it. Tell me the plan." For the next 4 hours they plotted. It was a creative, exhilarating process, a dark storm of ingenuity that pushed Catherine's pain into the background. They were no longer the victim and the avenger. They were architects. The cornerstone of their plan was a new character, Sebastian Thorne. "He needs to be everything Julian is, but more," Catherine dictated, pacing back and forth. "If Julian is a millionaire, Sebastian is a billionaire. If Julian has a penthouse, Sebastian has a private island. If Julian flies first class, Sebastian owns the jet." Marcus, a natural performer, was already getting into character. "He's not American," he declared. "Too easy to check. He's European, old family, but he made his own fortune. Media shy, a recluse. No social media footprint to speak of, which makes him mysterious and impossible to Google stalk effectively." They built Sebastian Thorne from the ground up. He was the heir to a defunct German industrial fortune who had brilliantly reinvested in rare earth minerals and private space exploration. His company, Thorne Global, was based in Zurich, with satellite offices in Hong Kong and London. He was in New York for a few months to quietly explore new investment opportunities. "We need to create a legend," Marcus said, scribbling notes on a legal pad. "He needs to be seen in the right places, but only briefly. A flash of impossible wealth." They began to choreograph the operation. Phase 1. The sighting. Marcus as Sebastian would start appearing at the periphery of the high-end world. He'd attend a Christie's auction and outbid a known hedge fund manager for a piece of modern art. He'd be seen dining at Daniel, but in the private skybox, a privilege reserved for a select few. He wouldn't interact. He would only be observed. Whispers would start. Who is that man? Phase 2, the lure. They needed to get Sebastian and Chloe in the same room. Olivia Catherine's art gallery owner friend was brought into the circle of trust. Her upcoming gallery opening, showcasing a trendy new photographer, was the perfect venue. Chloe, eager to be seen as a patron of the arts and to elevate her social standing, would undoubtedly be there on Julian's arm. That's where Sebastian will make his first move, Catherine planned. Subtle. He'll admire the same piece of art she's looking at. He'll make a quiet, insightful comment. He won't try to pick her up. He'll just plant a seed of intrigue. Phase 3. The escalation. This was the core of the honey trap. Sebastian would orchestrate a series of chance encounters. He would overwhelm Chloe not with crude displays of cash, but with a level of sophistication and access that would make Julian's world seem provincial. He wouldn't just send flowers. He'd send a rare orchid that was flown in that morning from Costa Rica with a simple handwritten note in German. He wouldn't offer a shopping spree. He'd mention he was flying to Milan for a suit fitting and casually ask if she'd like to join him. We need to make Julian look like the minor leagues. Marcus grinned, the thrill of the performance dancing in his eyes. We need her to see Julian as a stepping stone she's outgrown. Phase 4. The trap. The final act would take place at the Sterling Family Foundation's annual charity gala. It was the pinnacle of the New York social calendar, an event Chloe would be desperate to attend as a sign of her arrival. By then, Catherine calculated Chloe would have left Julian and would be expecting to make her grand debut on the arm of the elusive billionaire Sebastian Thorne. That's where the curtain would fall. To make Sebastian Thorne real, they spared no expense. Marcus was given a new wardrobe of bespoke suits, a Patek Philippe watch from the family vault, and a black Amex card with no conceivable limit. They rented a black Maybach with a driver. They even had their tech team create a shell website for Thorne Global, a single elegant landing page with a login portal and the words discretion, vision, power. As they finalized the details, Marcus looked at his sister with a newfound respect. The fragile, heartbroken woman was gone. In her place was a general commanding an army. "Are you sure about this cat?" he asked quietly, the game momentarily forgotten. "Once this starts, there's no going back. For you and Julian either." Catherine looked out at the city lights, her reflection, a pale ghost in the glass. Her hand went to her belly. "Julian and I, as we were." That ended the moment he gave another woman that bracelet. "I'm not destroying my marriage, Marcus. I'm discovering what's left of it, and I'm protecting my child's birthright from a predator. This isn't just revenge on her. It's a test for him. Let's see how he reacts when the worm turns. Let's see what he's made of when he's the one who gets thrown away." Her voice was as cut and clear as ice. The plan was in motion. The architect had drawn the blueprints. Now it was time to start building the trap. The trap was baited at Olivia Brent's gallery, opening in Chelsea. The cavernous, white space buzzed with the city's self-appointed cultural elite. Champagne flowed and the air crackled with networking and air kisses. Chloe arrived, clinging to Julian's arm like a trophy. She was wearing a crimson dress that was a shade too loud for the minimalist art on the walls, a deliberate choice to ensure she stood out. She surveyed the room with the keen eye of a hawk cataloguing the influential faces, desperate to be seen to be included. Julian looked distracted. a man pulled in two directions. He introduced Chloe to a few acquaintances, with a forced casualness that didn't go unnoticed, referring to her as a marketing consultant. The lie hung awkwardly in the air. Catherine had prepared Marcus meticulously. "Don't approach her directly," she'd instructed. "Let her see you. Let her feel your presence before you ever say a word." Marcus, in his persona as Sebastian Thorne, was a masterpiece of understated power. He wore a dark, tailored suit with no tie, a look of effortless European elegance. He didn't mingle. He stood alone near a large, dramatic photograph of a stormy sea, a glass of mineral water in his hand, observing the scene with a look of detached amusement. He radiated an aura of such profound self-assurance that he created his own gravitational pull. People noticed him. They whispered. Chloe noticed him. While Julian was cornered by a tech journalist, she found her eyes drifting to the mysterious stranger. He was handsome, but more than that, he was intriguing. He wasn't working the room. He was above it. As she moved to get a fresh glass of champagne, she found herself standing near the same photograph he was observing. "It's powerful, isn't it?" a deep voice with a faint, unplaceable European accent said beside her. She turned. It was him. Up close, his presence was even more formidable. "It is," she managed her voice, a little breathless. "It feels chaotic and beautiful at the same time." "A perfect metaphor for life," he said, his eyes scanning the photograph, not her. "It's by a German artist I collect. He manages to capture the sublime terror of nature. Most people just see a pretty picture of a wave." He finally turned his gaze to her, and his eyes, a startlingly clear blue, seemed to look right through her. "You don't strike me as someone who just sees the pretty picture." Chloe felt a jolt. He wasn't just complimenting her looks, he was complimenting her perception. It was a far more sophisticated line than any she had heard before. "I try not to be," she said, her voice dropping to a more intimate register. "I am Sebastian," he said, giving a slight bow of his head instead of offering a hand, a deliberately formal old-world gesture. "Chloe," she replied. Before she could say more, Julian reappeared at her side. "Everything okay?" he asked, his arm sliding possessively around her waist. He eyed Sebastian with a flicker of territorial suspicion. Sebastian gave Julian a dismissive glance, a micro-expression of such profound disinterest that it was more insulting than any glare. "Enjoy the evening," he said to Chloe, and then he simply turned and walked away, melting into the crowd. The seed was planted. Over the next 2 weeks, Sebastian Thorne executed Phase 3 with surgical precision. The encounters were always seemingly by chance, yet perfectly engineered to showcase the chasm between Julian's wealth and Sebastian's. One afternoon, as Chloe was having lunch with her friend Zara at an outdoor cafe in Soho, a sleek black Maybach purred to a stop at the curb. The driver opened the door, and Sebastian Thorne emerged. He spotted Chloe, and a slow smile spread across his face. He came over to their table. "Miss Vance, a pleasure to see you again," he said. Zara was staring, her jaw practically on the table. He didn't stay long. He was on his way to a meeting, something about geothermal prospecting in Iceland. He dropped the phrase so casually, it was like someone else mentioning a trip to the grocery store. Before leaving, he looked at the wilted rose in the small vase on their table. The next morning, the reception desk at Chloe's marketing firm called her. A delivery had arrived. It was a breathtaking arrangement of black baccarat roses, so dark they were almost velvet, with a simple card. These seemed more fitting. There was no phone number. No desperate plea for a date. Just a gesture of overwhelming, mysterious elegance. Julian had sent her roses the week before, a standard dozen red ones that now seemed pathetic by comparison. The final decisive blow came a week later. Chloe was complaining to Julian over dinner about her frustration with her job. "They're so small-minded, Julian. I have ideas that could revolutionize their entire strategy, but they won't listen." "It takes time to climb the ladder, honey," Julian had said a touch condescendingly. The very next day, a courier delivered a thick envelope to her office. Inside was a first-class ticket to Milan on a private charter dated for the upcoming weekend. The note was brief. "I'm told the finest business armor is forged in Italy. I have a fitting with my tailor Brioni. I've taken the liberty of arranging a consultation for you as well. A mind like yours deserves a wardrobe to match. A car will be at your apartment on Saturday morning. It is, of course, entirely your choice." This was it. This was the checkmate move. It wasn't just a gift. It was a challenge. It was an invitation into a world Julian Croft, for all his millions, couldn't access. The world of private jets, bespoke Italian suits, and casual globe-trotting power. She looked at the Cartier bracelet on her wrist. A few weeks ago, it had felt like the ultimate prize. Now it felt like a trinket, a consolation prize from the minor leagues. Her decision was swift and brutal. She broke up with Julian that night in his car after he'd taken her to dinner. He was talking about a potential site for a new distribution center in New Jersey. His world suddenly seemed so small, so domestic. "Julian, I don't think this is working," she said, her voice cool and practiced. He was stunned. "What are you talking about? We were just in Miami. I bought you—" "This isn't about what you can buy me," she lied, cutting him off. "It's about ambition. I need to be with someone who is bigger, who sees the whole world as a chessboard, not just a single market sector. I think you've gotten comfortable. I haven't." The words were chosen to wound his ego, the most vulnerable part of any man like him. He was speechless. He, Julian Croft, the tech titan, being told he wasn't ambitious enough. By the woman he had risked his marriage for. The irony was lost on him, submerged in the sting of rejection. "Is there someone else?" he finally asked, his voice tight with wounded pride. Chloe gave him a pitying look. "Don't be ridiculous," she said, leaving the question hanging just enough to be a yes. "I just think we want different things. I wish you the best, Julian. Truly." She got out of the car and walked away without looking back, leaving him sitting in the stunned, humiliated silence. She felt a momentary pang of something. Not guilt, but perhaps the thrill of the kill. She had discarded a CEO. She was on her way to bigger things. Back in her apartment, she packed. She looked at the ticket to Milan, her heart pounding with triumphant anticipation. She was Chloe Vance, and she was about to be outfitted in the armor of a queen, ready to take her place beside a true king. She had played the game and won. The invitation to the Sterling Foundation Gala had arrived in the mail that day, a thick, creamy card with embossed lettering. She had initially planned to pressure Julian into taking her. Now she would arrive with Sebastian Thorne. It would be her true coronation. She imagined the look on the face of Julian's mousy, pregnant wife when she saw who had replaced her. It was all falling into place more perfectly than she could have ever imagined. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a symphony of opulence. Crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small car, dripped light onto a sea of New York's most powerful and influential figures. The theme of the Sterling Family Foundation Gala was Foundations for the Future, a celebration of the charity's work in funding education for underprivileged children. For the guests, however, it was the ultimate arena for showcasing status and wealth. Chloe Vance made her entrance feeling like she had finally arrived at the center of the universe. She wore a gown of liquid silver, a custom piece she'd acquired in Milan on her whirlwind trip with Sebastian. It clung to her every curve, audacious and dazzling. On her arm, however, was not the billionaire she expected. Sebastian had called her that afternoon, his voice a smooth apology. A sudden, unavoidable crisis with his Zurich office. A satellite launch had experienced a minor orbital deviation. The words were so fantastically important, so far beyond the scope of normal life, that she couldn't possibly be upset. "I will be there, my dear, I promise," he'd said. "But I will be late. Please go ahead. My driver will take you. I want you to make your entrance. You will be the most radiant woman in the room. I will find you the moment I arrive." So she had arrived alone, a move that was in itself a statement of confidence. She walked in, not as a +1, but as a woman who belonged. She could already feel the whispers, see the curious glances. Who is she? The story she would tell that she was waiting for. Sebastian Thorne would only add to her mystique. Her eyes scanned the room. Searching. She saw Julian almost immediately. He was standing near the bar, looking drawn and haggard, nursing a scotch. He saw her, and his face tightened with a mixture of pain and anger. Chloe met his gaze for a moment, giving him a small, pitying smile before turning away. The satisfaction was exquisite. Then she saw her. Catherine Sterling Croft was standing at the center of a small group, the undeniable focal point of the room. She was not in a flashy gown, but an elegant, deep blue velvet dress that fell gracefully over her pregnant form. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, the kind of quiet, heavy jewels that are passed down through generations, not bought on a whim. She wasn't trying to be the center of attention. She simply was. She radiated a serene, unshakable power that made Chloe's silver dress suddenly feel cheap and desperate. The two women's eyes met across the crowded room. Catherine offered a polite, enigmatic smile, a queen acknowledging a courtier. Determined to seize the moment, Chloe began to circulate, dropping Sebastian's name into conversations with calculated nonchalance. "Oh, this old thing," she'd say of her dress. "Sebastian insisted I have it made in Milan." Or, "Sebastian is hoping to make it, he's just dealing with a minor orbital deviation with one of his satellites." The reactions were a mixture of awe and confusion, which was exactly what she wanted. An hour into the event, a hush fell over the room as Catherine took to the stage to give the welcome address. She spoke eloquently about the Foundation's mission, her voice calm and clear. "We build foundations for children," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "But we must also be vigilant about the foundations of our own lives. We must ensure they are built on trust, integrity, and truth. Because when those foundations are weak, everything built upon them is at risk of collapse." The words seemed to hang in the air, freighted with a meaning that only a few people in the room could begin to grasp. Julian shifted uncomfortably. Chloe felt a prickle of unease. After her speech, Catherine descended the stage and began to move through the room. Chloe watched her, a predator sizing up her rival. She decided now was the time. She would go over, introduce herself, and deliver the final killing blow, the casual mention of her new superior benefactor. But before she could move, Catherine was walking directly toward her. "Miss Vance," Catherine said, her voice smooth as silk. "I'm Catherine Croft. I don't believe we've been formally introduced." Chloe was momentarily thrown. She had expected to be the one in control of this encounter. "It's a pleasure," Chloe said, recovering quickly. "Your speech was very moving." "Thank you," Catherine replied, her eyes holding Chloe's. "I saw you come in alone. Are you waiting for someone?" This was the opening. "I'm actually," Chloe said, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. "Sebastian Thorne. I'm not sure if you know him. He's quite private." Catherine's smile widened. "Sebastian Thorne," she repeated, tasting the name. "Yes, I know him very well. In fact, he's just arrived." Chloe's heart leapt. She turned her eyes, scanning the grand entrance, expecting to see the handsome, powerful man who was about to solidify her new life. "Allow me to make the introduction," Catherine said, and raised a hand. From the crowd, a man emerged, walking toward them. But it wasn't the suave European billionaire. It was Marcus Sterling, Catherine's brother. He was wearing the same bespoke suit and the Patek Philippe watch, but his expression was different. The cool detachment was gone, replaced by a look of wry, theatrical amusement. Chloe stared, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. "You're—" "Her brother," Marcus said, gesturing to Catherine. "Marcus Sterling, at your service." He gave a mocking bow. "Though for the past few weeks you've known me as Sebastian." The blood drained from Chloe's face. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. The murmurs around them, which had been a gentle buzz, were now a roaring in her ears. She looked from Marcus's smirking face to Catherine's calm, victorious expression. I don't understand." Chloe stammered, the words catching in her throat. "I think you do," Catherine said, her voice dropping to a cold, precise whisper, meant only for Chloe. "You thought you found a bigger fish. You thought you could discard my husband because you'd found a billionaire. But the billionaire was a fantasy, a story, one we wrote just for you." Chloe's eyes darted around. People were staring openly now, their phones half raised. She saw Olivia Brent standing nearby, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. She saw Julian frozen by the bar, his face a mask of dawning abject horror as he finally understood the full scope of what was happening. He wasn't just a cheated-on husband. He was a pawn in his wife's brutal, intricate game of revenge. He had been discarded and humiliated by Chloe, only to discover that his own wife had orchestrated the entire thing. "Every chance meeting," Marcus explained, enjoying his monologue. "Every gift, every flight. Every word I said to you was a line in a script written by my sister. You're not a gold digger, Chloe. You're just a fool. You fell for the oldest trick in the book, your own greed." The humiliation was a physical force pressing in on her, stealing the air from her lungs. The silver dress felt like a suit of armor that had just been melted onto her skin. Her grand entrance had become a public execution. "My husband was weak," Catherine said, her voice cutting through Chloe's shock. "And you are predatory. You both deserved a lesson in consequences. You, Miss Vance, wanted a foundation of wealth. Instead, you'll be a cautionary tale. And my husband," she glanced over at Julian, her eyes like chips of ice, "has learned what it feels like to be deemed not enough." Chloe stood there, stripped bare, in the center of the glittering ballroom. The life she had fantasized about, the victory, she had tasted all of it, was a lie, a carefully constructed stage, and she was the only one who hadn't known she was an actor in a tragedy. She turned and fled, pushing through the crowd of stunned, whispering faces, the sound of their judgment chasing her out into the cold New York night. Catherine watched her go, her expression unreadable. She had not raised her voice, She had not cried. She had simply taken a predator, a problem, and dismantled it with the cold, quiet efficiency of a bomb disposal expert. She then turned her gaze back to her husband, who stood pale and broken across the room. The first part of her plan was complete. The second was about to begin. The aftermath of the gala was a bloodbath in the gossip columns and social media feeds. The story was too delicious to ignore the ambitious mistress, the fake billionaire, and the brilliant pregnant wife who had orchestrated the most elaborate revenge plot New York society had ever seen. The Sterling Gambit, one blog dubbed it. Chloe Vance became an overnight pariah. Her name, her face, her carefully curated ambition, all were now punchlines. She was fired from her marketing job for conduct unbecoming of the company's image. Her landlord started eviction proceedings. The friends who had cheered on her gold-digging like Zara vanished as if they'd never existed. Chloe was erased, a ghost haunting the city she had tried to conquer. But for Catherine, the public humiliation of her rival was only the first step. The true test, the real reconstruction, had to happen within the silent, opulent walls of their penthouse. Julian came home that night, or rather in the early hours of the morning, a broken man. The arrogance had been flayed from him, leaving behind a raw, quivering shame. He found Catherine in the living room, sitting in an armchair, bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp. The city lights twinkled behind her, oblivious. He started with the usual script. The apologies, the pleas, the self-flagellation. Catherine, I am so sorry. I was a fool, an idiot. I don't know what I was thinking. I love you. I love our baby. Please, please forgive me. The words tumbled out, desperate and rehearsed. Catherine listened patiently, her hands resting on her stomach. She let him exhaust himself, let the silence fall after his pathetic monologue. When she finally spoke, her voice was not angry. It was not hurt. It was the calm, measured voice of a CEO outlining the terms of a merger, and it terrified him more than any shouting match could have. Stop, she said simply. The word cut through his pleading. Your apology is irrelevant right now. It's a reflex. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry you were made to look like a fool. The kind of sorrow that matters, the kind that leads to change, takes time to cultivate. You haven't had that time. What do you want me to do? He whispered, his voice cracking. I'll do anything. I know you will, she said, because you're cornered. What I want is not for you to do anything. What I want is for you to understand why I did what I did. She stood up and walked to the window looking out over their kingdom. This wasn't just about punishing that woman, Julian. This was about you. You have a fundamental weakness. It's your ego. It needs constant validation. And when you felt the slightest bit neglected or bored, you sought it elsewhere. You didn't just have an affair. You risked everything. Our family, our future, the stability this child deserves for a cheap thrill and an ego boost. She turned back to him. I could have divorced you. I could have taken half of your company and walked away. My family would have supported me. But that felt insufficient. Because the problem, your weakness, would remain. You would just find another woman and another, and our child would grow up with a father who was a revolving door of indiscretions. She walked to the desk and picked up a thick folder of documents her lawyer had drawn up that week. She placed it on the coffee table between them. So this is what is going to happen. This is not a negotiation. He looked at the folder as if it were a bomb. This is a post-nuptial agreement, she explained. It transfers 60% of your shares in Croft Innovations, along with a controlling interest in our joint liquid assets, into a trust. A trust for our child of which I am the sole trustee until they come of age. You will retain your title as CEO. You will still draw your salary. But your decision-making power in the company and in our finances is now shared. I will have a permanent seat on the board. Your personal spending will be subject to review. We will be partners in the truest sense of the word, Julian. Your kingdom is no longer solely yours. He stared at her aghast. This was more than punishment. This was a coup, a complete restructuring of their entire existence. You're taking my company, he breathed. No, she corrected him calmly. I am protecting our family's primary asset. You proved you were a poor steward, that you could be compromised. So I am installing a new system of checks and balances. Think of me as your personal board of directors. He saw the checkmate. If he refused, she would divorce him, and the ensuing scandal, combined with the loss of the Sterling family's backing and connections, would gut the company anyway. He would lose her his child and a massive chunk of his fortune. Her plan gave him a path, however narrow and humbling, to keep all three. And us? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. What happens to us? We will stay married, Catherine said. Our child will be born with a father and a mother under the same roof. You will sleep in the guest room. You will attend counseling. You will work every single day to earn back a fraction of the trust you shattered. Forgiveness is not on the table. It is not something I can give you right now. But you may in time earn the right to ask for it again. She laid out the new foundation of their life built upon the ashes of the old one. There was no passion in her voice, only purpose. She had seen the crack in their gilded cage, and instead of trying to patch it, she had torn it down and was now building a fortress in its place. A fortress to protect her child. Julian Croft, the tech visionary. The master of his universe finally understood true power. It wasn't in flashy deals or public acclaim. It was in the quiet, unyielding resolve of the woman standing before him. He had mistaken her grace for weakness, her composure for complacency. He now saw it for what it was, the calm surface of a deep and formidable ocean. He picked up a pen, his hand shaking, and signed the documents. He signed away control of the empire he had built, handing the keys to the woman he had betrayed. It was the end of his reign, and for Catherine and the child she carried, it was the beginning of a new, unshakable dynasty, founded not on a naive belief in love, but on the cold, hard certainty of control. Their future would not be a fairy tale, but it would be secure. And in their world, that was the only happily ever after that truly mattered. And there you have it, a story not just of infidelity, but of breathtaking strategy and icy revenge. Catherine Croft proves that the most dangerous woman is not the one who screams and throws plates, but the one who smiles, waits and dismantles her enemies with the precision of a chess grandmaster. She didn't just get even. She rewrote the rules of the entire game, securing her child's future and putting her husband firmly in his place. What did you think of her plan? Was it brilliant justice or a step too far? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories of drama, intrigue, and powerful people getting exactly what they deserve, make sure to hit that like button and share this video with someone who appreciates a well-served plate of revenge. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next real-life drama. You never know whose perfect world is about to come crashing down.